Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I'm so pleased to have Dr. Greg Popcak with us today. Greg and his wife, Lisa, founded and direct the Pastoral Solutions Institute, a Catholic telemental health practice providing individual, marriage, and family counseling services by phone to Catholics around the world. They are the authors of more than 20 books and programs and host a live call-in radio talk show addressing relationship concerns and questions. More to Life Radio can be heard on 400 stations affiliated with the EWTN radio network and Sirius XM satellite radio channel 130. Greg's a fellow of the American Association of Pastoral Counselors, a board certified diplomat of the American Board of Examiners in Clinical Social Work, and a winner of the Father Richard M. Hogan Award for contributions to the social sciences. He is the chair of the Marriage and Family Studies program at Holy Apostles College and Seminary and serves as an adjunct professor of both psychology and graduate theology at Franciscan University. Lisa is a certified family life coach and professional educator and serves as vice president of the Pastoral Solutions Institute. The Popcaks were featured speakers at the 2015 World Meeting of Families. Woo, that is a mouthful. Greg, thanks so much for being here.
That's all the time we have, folks. Thanks for being here.
Well, you have an august resume, but let's talk about how you got started. Back in the 1990s, you were pursuing some counseling and then you saw a void. So let's talk about how that started.
Well, sure. I was in private practice, local private practice at the time. And then our first book, For Better Forever, A Catholic Guide to Lifelong Marriage, came out through our Sunday Visitor. And I started getting calls from people looking for a place to turn for faithful marriage counseling. And there weren't a lot of Catholic resources for that at the time. So I thought, all right, well, this will be my bit for the church. I'll do 2 or 3 sessions a week or something like that. And within 6 months, I had to close my face-to-face practice, and I was doing telehealth as of 1999. So wow. before it was cool. And since then, we've really grown. We're a pastoral counseling practice now with 20 full-time pastoral counselors. We do over 30,000 sessions a year with Catholics all over the world.
And is that you do like couples and individuals? How does that work? Talk about how telehealth works. My understanding of it, and some of our marriage champions too might be more familiar with you're bound by your state lines, but somehow have a way that you're able to have more access.
Yeah, so the introduction is it was telemental health. We're not actually doing clinical mental health counseling. We're doing pastoral counseling. And so the difference in clinical mental health counseling, you're identifying specific diagnoses and trying to reduce specific symptoms. With pastoral counseling, you are addressing problems, but the main focus is how can I help the person that I'm working with address those problems as a Christian disciple and become a more effective disciple through that process. And so it has much more of a faith-based focus. Also, we have a formal relationship with the church. So we're recognized by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops as an official ministry in the church. And so because of that, we're ministering as Catholics to Catholics in a Catholic integrated context for the specific purpose of helping people live more faithful lives. We're able to operate across state lines.
I just love that, how you explain that so succinctly, because I know, when I've interviewed different, other of our marriage leaders, that has been kind of a bugaboo. And so that's really a nice way that you can counsel across that. Now, how does that work exactly with the telehealth? If someone, let's say there's a couple, because you do couples as well as individuals, right? Let's say there's a couple. How would that work? They just call or how
well, we can, very much like this. I mean, really, it's either by Zoom or the telephone. And, there's a lot of research now on telehealth that shows that it's as effective, if not more effective in some ways than face-to-face work for a couple of reasons. First, access. It's just easier to make the appointments. When you're doing marriage counseling, you have to find a sitter, and it's, and kids get sick and things happen. And, this way, when we're doing the telecounseling, wherever you are, whatever's going on around you, sometimes it's actually a benefit to be able to see all the craziness in the background, so that can be very helpful. The other aspect, because we do a lot of work on the phone as well, which is a little unusual now. Anyway, I mean, like I said, we've been doing that since 1999. But what we find there is that people tend to open up a lot more readily when they can't see you.
Wow.
There's as a Catholic, there's a sort of confession behind the screen quality to the experience where, in research, they call it the disinhibition effect. And so, if I can't see you, then I don't feel as judged or worried about being judged by you, So folks tend to jump into things a little bit more quickly that way. So like I said, we'll work with our clients, whichever they're more comfortable with, whether it's video or telephone, but both work very, very well.
That is so interesting, but that does make sense, especially from someone from a Catholic background who is used to going to confession, where it is anonymous isn't exactly the word, and confidential is not exactly the word, but side by side with a little screen in between, there's the veil. That is so neat. Well, how did that morph into a radio program? Let's talk about that, because I mean, that's live. That's crazy. You've got to be, when I think about, trying to field questions live like that without having any idea what might be coming at you.
It keeps you on your toes. Yeah.
Yes.
So, again, when the first book, For Better Forever, came out, and there weren't a lot of resources in that space for Catholics, we started doing radio interviews with other established hosts, in particular, God rest his soul, Al Cresta, who is the president of, or was the president of Ave Maria Radio, which provides a good chunk of EWTN's programming. So Ave Maria Radio is a program creator. EWTN is the distributor for a lot of the programs. Plus, they create their own programs as well. But anyway, so Lisa and I had done a lot of interviews on the various programs on Ave Maria and EWTN, and at some point Al reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to have your own show?" And we're like, "Sure," and it was a real baptism by fire, really, but a lot of fun. And so I think it was in 2001, so it's almost 25 years for us that we've been on the air. And it's grown steadily from there. So we were on, I think, 2 stations, something in the Ave Maria radio area, and then it grew, steadily up until EWTN picked us up. Then probably about 10 years ago now, and we're on all their entire network, plus carried on Sirius XM channel 130. And we air Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it's a live call-in show with a different theme every day. So some days we'll do marriage, some days we'll do parenting, other days we do depression, anxiety, guilt, just garden variety problems that we all deal with, and we just take calls and offer faith-based insight.
Well, I'm glad you gave us some of the topics, because I was going to ask you said 24 years. What are some of the questions that are coming up now? Or do you see some more themes, especially maybe related to marriage?
I think that the classic themes there. I mean, I think the kinds of problems that people have in marriage are eternal. So that's fairly standard. I mean, the problems with communication. I think one of the largest issues, of course, that we do get is folks who are unequally yoked, I guess you'd say. And I think the insight there that a lot of people don't appreciate is that more often than not, I would say 9.5 times out of 10. When religion or spirituality divides a couple, it's not so much a religion or spiritual problem as much as it is a failure of respect in the marriage in general. So as a rule, we'll always ask the people who call, so let's take it off of faith for a second and tell me how you resolve anything that you don't see eye to eye about. When you have a strong opinion about something, your husband has a strong opinion about something, and it is usually the woman who's calling in with this issue. Do you tend to either agree with him and go along with him just to kind of go along? Do you just agree to disagree? Or are the two of you able to kind of work through your differing positions and come to a mutually satisfying conclusion? Like I said, 9.5 times out of 10, it's that the woman just kind of capitulates and goes along with it, except in the area of faith, because she realizes that's bigger than her.
Yeah.
And she's willing to fight for that. And because of that, that's why faith becomes a wedge issue in the relationship. When you have basic respect in the marriage, what that means is not just the two people are being nice to each other, but it means they're trying to see what's good and true and beautiful about the things that each one finds true, good, and beautiful. And so even if I'm not the same place as you are spiritually, I try to support you. I try to join you as I can. I try to step out of my comfort zone as much as possible. So when you don't have that failure of respect, differences in faith and spirituality aren't as big a wedge. But where you do have that basic foundational problem in the marriage, that's when faith and spirituality can become pretty antagonistic and divisive.
Yeah. So how do you help people work through that? Because like you said, that's often a hill somebody's willing to die on. And maybe they didn't even realize it was going to be a problem until the kids came in the picture, right? That seems to be a real
Sometimes, yeah, that's true. Well, I think the first step is really reframing it that way, because when as long as people understand it as primarily a religious issue or a faith issue, you get a lot of advice about, well, you can't shove your religion down your husband's throat or your spouse's throat. You have to be patient. You have to sort of pray about it, offer it up. But when you're able to identify it as a respect issue in the relationship and see the broader picture, then you can start saying, well, we really need to work on the marriage as a whole and how we communicate together in general, and the fact that you, spouse, don't tend to recognize the validity of my ideas or my opinions or my desires unless you agree with them, and that's a problem, because as long as that happens, there's really no space for me to be in this marriage. And that often is an eye opener, because as long as people can just dismiss it as a religious issue, or that's just a faith difference, they tend to just try to muddle along. But seeing this as that deeper concern gives people a new way in too, especially because nobody wants to be thought of as disrespectful. Nobody wants to be thought of as the person who's being disrespectful to their spouse. And so being able to approach it that way really reframes it from how come you're trying to force me to be as religious as you are, to we just really need to learn to appreciate the things that each other finds good and worthwhile.
That is so interesting, and that makes so much sense when you present it so beautifully like that. Any other key topics that are maybe coming up more now? I know there's been some new research about spirituality and change, a few things changing in America. Actually, some trends maybe look like they're going up. So, any other things that have come along and about marriage now that?
I mean, boundaries are a big topic, and now there are more adult children who are experiencing cutoffs with their parents, and wondering what kind of boundaries to set with their parents. And so, we've been seeing a lot of those kinds of calls, both to the practice and to the radio program. We'll get it from both sides, where the parents who are wondering how they can rebuild their relationship with their adult children, or adult children who are feeling like their parents are being too involved in their lives or too controlling in some way, and how to set respectful boundaries there. So that's been a big issue for us. The other thing too is, we kind of harp on this a lot, the need for families and couples to have strong rituals for what we will say working, playing, talking, and praying together. And most families today, couples today, don't have those rituals because they've been eaten up by sports or extracurricular activities, work, and because of that, families aren't really families. They're more collections of individuals living under the same roof and sharing a data plan. So being able to recapture the idea of what it means to be family, and to carve out space for family, and to treat family life as an activity where we meaningfully carve out time to work and play and talk and pray together every day, so that we can have sort of a shared body of experiences that enable us to get along with each other, to influence each other, to grow together, to communicate more effectively with each other. Just as an illustration, when it was funny, when COVID hit and everybody was in lockdown, we sort of had two trends hit us in the practice. The first one was a lot of people that we were working with for a long time in marriage and family counseling got better, because all of a sudden they had time to be together and do the things that we were recommending them to do.
We've heard that.
Right?
I've seen that trend. Yes. And
then we had a whole lot of other people who weren't getting that training or support, suddenly having to deal with each other and not knowing what to do, and then calling for counseling. But what it all comes down to is having the time and knowing what to do with it. And so, a lot of our work these days has to do with teaching couples and families how to be couples and families, and not just individuals living under the same roof.
Yeah, I love that. That is so insightful. I love that you brought your adult children and the boundaries, and that's a little bit not exactly focused on marriage, but it dealing with that's a stress point for empty nesters dealing with their. I know I have two adult sons myself, and so that's the topic of your latest book, right? Your most recent. Maybe give us a little snippet about how that adult child relationship can intersect with a marriage, either
Yeah.
for the positive or for the negative. I know
Well,
you're kind of on that other side, and we're in a good spot right now, but we don't have any in-laws yet, so we'll see.
okay. Well, no, I mean, it's especially problematic when, say, our adult kids fall away from the faith that we raised them in, or making different choices than we hoped that they would. And husbands and wives very often disagree about how to handle that.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a source of a lot of tension in the marriage when you can't be on the same page about how to approach it. And there are no real easy answers for this. I think the most important thing, though, that parents need to realize is that you have to make sure that that the relationship is deep enough to contain the conversations you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by that is that very often parents and adult children have fairly shallow relationships. They talk about current events, they talk about the weather, but they don't really talk about where they're at inside their hearts. And then when the parents want to address those deeper issues that require more vulnerability, it feels strange to the kids, especially. It feels violating. And so, I use the metaphor. It's like trying to pour a gallon of milk into a shot glass. You're trying to have this deep conversation in a relationship that doesn't hold a lot of volume. And so, parents, a lot of times they think, well, it's about my technique, right? So if I just maybe if I pour a little more slowly, all the milk will go into the shot glass. Or if I turn around 3 times and pour it over my head, then it'll go in the,
Yeah.
we come up with all these ways that I'm going to try to say it this way or try to do it that way. And none of them work because the relationship isn't deep enough to contain the conversation. And so the question is, not so much how do I have this conversation where I can get my kid to come back to church or get my kid to start living this way as opposed to that way. It's really about how can I come alongside my child in the ways that they'll allow me and be supportive and be experienced as a support to them and build the relationship where I can so it is deep enough for those conversations to occur naturally and for my adult kids to be receptive to them.
Yeah.
So a lot, it involves a lot of that kind of thing, which involves, of course, having the husband and wife really kind of come together and talking about how to do that, as opposed to one spouse saying, we need to press and we need to press and we need to push. And the other spouse saying, you just need to back off and let them live their life and they'll come around on their own. And then they end up fighting with each other, So a lot of that work is really how to get the couple on the same page about that stuff.
Well, and that is such, some of the marriages right now that seem to be having the most pain points are that empty nest, that gray divorce phenomena. And I would imagine that is a stressor. It's not the only stressor during that time of life, but that is a stressor if those, dealing with those relationships with the adult children. So I really I love your analogy with the shot glass and the milk.
Yeah.
I know one of our marriage leaders, Jim Burns, has a great book as well that talks about keeping your mouth shut and the welcome mat open. About that's kind of the same thing of keeping that relationship, developing that until it's deep enough to consider, those very deeply distressing things when you raise your children in the church and then all of a sudden you're like, what? You can't even be a cheester if you don't go on Christmas.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that's that's actually a big focus now. So we did a study through the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown University that looked at the fact that we're actually losing about 85% of Catholic kids who are raised in Catholic homes. By the time they reach adulthood, they leave the church. So we're only keeping about 15% of our kids. But we studied families that successfully raised all of their kids to a faithful adulthood and looked at what are the habits. We actually interviewed the parents and the adult kids to identify the habits that they felt were contributed to their success. And what we found was that the key to raising faithful kids, and I think this will be true for any denomination, is that the kids have to have experienced the faith as a source of the warmth in their home growing up. That when they could say that, there's something about our faith life that challenged us to be a stronger family, to try hard. We weren't a perfect family, but we approached problems differently. than my friends' families did, and we handled stressors differently than my friends' families did, and there was more warmth there in the home. We tried harder maybe than my friends' families did, and so because of that, there's a certain sense that the faith is the source of warmth in my home with my wife and my kids when I grow up, and
Yeah.
that makes our kids want to hold on to it, and so. We created this resource called Catholic Home. It's spelled HOM. It's an app actually, where we provide coaching and resources to help Catholic couples and families live out these 12 habits that our research identified that contribute to the faith being the source of the warmth in the home. And so it's not just about raising faithful kids. It's also about just creating that warm, loving, faith-filled environment in the household today.
And I would imagine that also contributes, that warm feeling starts with that relationship with the couple with Christ and the faith in their marriage, which is, I know you have a book, one of your original ones, How to Heal Your Marriage and Nurture Lasting Love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where that starts there, right?
Well, yeah. And in fact, we're teaching this model to engaged couples as well. Yeah. Because we want the key to a strong family is a strong marriage, and so right. we want engaged couples and newly married couples to start living out these habits in their marriage, so that they can start doing them with their kids as well. So they're all well. A lot of them has to do with like what I was sharing, the idea of creating strong rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying together, prioritizing family, some time for the couple and some time for the family. Being demonstrative with your affection and affirmation for each other. I mean, these are all just very simple things. But when they're missing, we notice that a lot. And when they're present, they make a huge difference, both in the satisfaction we can experience in our households and in our capacity to live our faith and pass our faith on to our kids.
Yeah. And you talk in the How to Heal Your Marriage too, some ways that just helping that, each other, you kind of iron sharpening iron in with each other and helping each other be their best self. Talk a little bit more like that. You had some polarizing questions and then how you help each other.
Yeah. So I think, you're kind of touching on several different things. So one of the points that we talk about in that book, and this goes back to our kind of mutual respect idea, when couples are arguing about things, it's often because they've accidentally polarized the conversation. They start with a position of, do we do this or we do that?
Yeah.
Or do we do this or we don't do that? And what we suggest in there is that what you really need to do is kind of back up and try to understand, you negotiate the how and the when, but not the what. So what I mean by that is, let me understand what it is that you want. So when you say, I want to do this, help me understand why you want to do that. Because what you're presenting here is a plan for getting some need, but you're not necessarily expressing the need, right? So if I can step back and say, well, if we did that, what would that get for you? Help me understand, like, what would that do for, okay, so now we've got the what, and we're not going to negotiate the what. I'm going to affirm, yes, I want that for you, okay? And here's what I'm trying to do by advocating for my position. This is what I want. Now let's negotiate the how and the when. Because if we can start by saying, okay, this is what I need, and okay, this is what you need, let's figure out how and when we can get both of those things met so we can create a plan together that incorporates both of those sets of values. But if we just start with, well, should we go to your mother's this weekend, or should we go fishing this weekend?
I know.
We just argue back and forth between those things. One of us feels like we have to lose, right? But if we're able to say, well, what I really want by visiting my mom is to have a stronger connection with my family, and I really miss my mom. It's, okay, what I really want to do by fishing is get some time to relax. Okay, so those are our whats. We need to relax, and we need connection with family. Now, how can we make a plan that allows us to work out a timing and the framework that allows us to do both of those things?
I just love that because, even just that example that can swirl into such a conflict. I mean, I just think of, different conversations I'd have with friends or, even in my own marriage, just where you're not coming at those things don't have to be mutually exclusive and to make that plan. But sometimes you need that third party like you to talk, whether it's asking a question on the radio or like if somebody called you on the radio, how long do you address? Do you get a 5-minute answer? Do you get a 30-second answer?
I mean, really, it may be 7 minutes on the outside. We have to keep it short, but but we do what we can in the time that we've got, and so we're able to kind of present some basic principles like we're doing here, that give people some tips for moving forward, and then we usually connect them with some additional resources, whether that's books or our telecounseling practice or other resources besides that. So, we try to give people what we can in the time that we've got.
Well, I love that you pointed back to your telecounseling practice, because I think that would be, just as you made that sound so reasonable, I could imagine a couple doing a session with you or one of your 20 could make any of those types of conflicts, sound so reasonable.
That's our hope. Yeah. So it's CatholicCounselors.com is the site, and you can learn more about our work and our books and all of our other resources there as well.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What will a couple that goes to your website, what would they find there? What's your on-ramp?
Sure.
What would they,
No, that's right. There's information about how we work. There are, of course, the bios of all of the people that work with us. And we have actually a channel with a lot of self-help videos that people can access to if they just want some tips. And then there's, of course, the store with all of our books. But the main feature, of course, is the telecounseling practice. And so when folks reach out to us, they will fill out a contact form that describes kind of what their problem is or what they're hoping to get. And when we receive that, we match them with one of our team members that would be most qualified to kind of address them. And then they reach out by either phone or email to set up an appointment. And we are usually able to accommodate, we usually respond to those initial requests within 24 to 48 hours, and we can get you scheduled most often within a week.
And you have some life coaching too, right? So
yes, we do have
all.
The coaching is more through Catholic Home, but yes, we do some coaching as well.
Okay, because you really do offer, you don't have to be on that, brink of swirling conflict. You could really, like you said, you have the premarital programs.
Well, and that's one of the big differences too between pastoral counseling and then mental health counseling, right? So with mental health counseling, you're struggling with a diagnosable condition, and you're trying to reduce symptoms that are affecting your kind of daily functioning. With pastoral counseling, it's a bit like coaching on steroids, really, where you're really trying to help people apply both psychological and spiritual resources to handle problems of daily life.
Yeah, well, and that's such a spot that a person of faith, and especially you talking to the Catholic audience, you want to incorporate. I mean, I couldn't think as a Christian myself, I wouldn't want to speak to a counselor that wouldn't be part of their tool. That wouldn't be a tool in their toolbox, that they would just kind of dismiss my faith or Bible has to say,
And it is hard to find, and to be able to have somebody that can bring your spiritual traditions into the work and help you understand, so again, from coming from the Catholic perspective, how the sacraments can play a role in your healing life, how Catholic spirituality can play a role, and how insights from the saints can help you discern things more effectively, so just being able to bring those sort of treasures from a 2,000-year-old spiritual tradition is really helpful.
In a way that resonates, that makes sense. You might offer a practice or a prayer or a certain way that, praying the rosary together or certain ways. I'm just saying that, what I see my mother-in-law do, but, certain things that really might be very, very meaningful to a Catholic couple,
right,
that would be helpful. I was looking too, you wrote a book about sex.
I did write a book about sex. It's called Holy Sex.
Yes.
A Catholic Guide to Mind-Blowing, Toe-Curling, Infallible Loving.
Woohoo!
we wanted to get some attention with the title. Yeah. There's this perception that Catholics are down on sex, and that's really not the case at all. It's that we have so much esteem for it, that it deserves to be respected, and so the book really just talks a lot about, how Catholic couples, married couples, can have a full, joyful, loving, intimate, and spirit-filled sexual relationship.
Wow, who wouldn't want that? If that's not a plug for people to go to your website, I don't know what is.
It's our best-selling book.
It's not surprising. Oh, well, Greg, thank you so much for being here. It was just delightful getting to talk to you.
Great talking with you, too. Thank you.
Oh, and it's always Marriage Champions. If you'd like to know more about the Popcaks and their Pastoral Solutions Institute, you can find us at marriageinitiative.org or marriageresources.org.